with a very wonderful guest. This is MK, who recently scored a 770 on the GMAT, posted a wonderful debrief in the GMAT Club forum. His username is Baboosh123. So this is the third in our series of live interviews with people who have wonderful stories of GMAT conquest. If you haven't seen the previous two with D. Cummins and TOEFL, go check those out. MK is our highest score of the group with a 770. And remember, these are all recorded live, so no second takes, no edits, no snack breaks. So we're putting poor MK on the spot to tell his story. And if you have questions, please send it to the comments if you're watching this live, and I will do my best to ask absolutely anything you guys would like to hear MK talk about. MK, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Charles. It's great to see you in person. Like, I have always watched your videos, but I'm glad I'm talking with you live.
It's an honor. The videos don't normally get people to 770s, so awesome to hear your story.
I heard that you got an 800 or a 790, so it's not often that I speak to people that got 790 or 800.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So before we jump into your whole story and kind of what you did with your studies and what got you to the finish line, just give everybody a little bit of your background. Tell us about you. Where are you from? Where do you live now? What do you do for a living? And tell us a little bit about your goals.
Absolutely. I grew up in India, in the city called New Delhi. I was there for the first 23 years or so of my life, came to New York. I was living in Manhattan for 7 years, was working in a management consulting firm, and then I moved to Madison, Wisconsin recently for my work stuff. And yeah, that's where I am. I'm not one of your typical guys, candidates that will have like 3 or 4 years of work experience. I have close to 10 years of work experience, primarily in healthcare. I was in a healthcare management consulting firm before, and now I am in a healthcare company that helps detect cancer. I'm an associate director here, leading a team of 5. And my GMAT was more for exec side and less so for the full-time MBA.
Excellent. So where are you planning to apply, if you don't mind sharing that with everybody?
Yeah, probably because I'm in the Madison, Wisconsin area. My site is set on the 2 in the Midwest, the Booth and Kellogg. That's where I'm thinking of applying.
Excellent. And when you started your GMAT study process, was there any particular score you had in mind? Were you chasing the 770, or was there a different number you were thinking about initially?
So one is aspirational and one is realistic. Aspirational was 800. Realistic was anything more than 730 and above. And I was like, for an exec, even 710 or 720 might work well, but still I just wanted to have a better score. So I was hoping anything above 730 will work for me. But I really wanted to crack it. I was like, maybe I can get anything above 780 or even 800. But I realized mid-prep that that's just not possible.
So tell us a little bit about your starting point. So we talked a little bit earlier. You said you started in November. So tell us what that was like in the beginning. Tell us about kind of what your initial struggles were. And did you take a practice test right at the beginning?
Yeah, sure. My first GMAT was in 2010, in fact, when I was really thinking about doing a full-time MBA. I was in India, like I mentioned, and I scored well there. So I was very familiar with the old format. Then there used to be 2 essays back then instead of like an IR, but I got a decent score, so I knew what the exam was about. Therefore, I didn't give myself too much time. Like, I started prepping somewhere around November, is when I started. And I scheduled my exam for January 7th because I knew realistically that will be my best window to take the exam, as we had the Christmas holiday and I will get like a couple of weeks of break during that time. And that's when I'll be able to do well, just focus on the exams, because otherwise I'm not like one of those people that can actually study 3 hours every day. I'm just not that determined or perseverant enough. I was like, that focused window will help me a lot.
And so do you remember what your score was back in 2010 when you first took the GMAT?
Yeah, my score back in 2010 was 760.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, and I was hoping I will be able to repeat that. But frankly, I knew in my heart that even if I get like 730, 40-ish, I will be able to go to and apply to respectable universities without getting that 760 again.
And do you remember how much you studied back in 2010?
So for that exam, I didn't study much because I was in India and I was studying for another exam at that time, which is like the CAT exam for
Mhm.
your IIMs. And yeah, I had prepared for that exam and I found the verbal for GMAT and in fact quant for GMAT not very tough after taking that exam. I studied a month for that exam.
Okay, excellent. So you'd already done so much prep for the CAT exam back in India that by the time you got to the GMAT, you're like, I'm good here.
Exactly, and I don't mean to say that GMAT is easy or anything. It's just that I was in the mold already of taking so many computer adaptive tests, and I knew quant well. And really, the focus on GMAT at that time was on sentence correction.
Gotcha. So when you started back up in November, so November of 2019, you're back at it after a 9+ year layoff
Yeah.
from studying. Where did you focus your attention? What did you do first? What was your study approach?
Yeah, so I remembered that Manhattan GMAT was the best resource. But this time, what I did was internet back then was a little bit different than internet now. I was like, let me get to a couple of websites to see what's hot right now in terms of what are the best books. And I realized that official guide is still the go-to. That is still the best book to start the study procedure. That's where I started from. But I logged on to GMAT Club. I opened my account sometime around October on GMAT Club. That's when I started to read like what are the best resources. I started to collect them. Then I got like Manhattan GMAT, and yeah, those were the two key books that I got. And then I got this Kaplan 800 as well, which I frankly never used. But those were the two key resources: Official Guide and Manhattan Prep.
Excellent. So with Manhattan, were you just kind of reading through the books? Tell us a little bit more about kind of how you use the official guides and the Manhattan in tandem with each other.
Yeah, so I started off with official guides first, just going through a couple of diagnostic tests. Within that book, there is a diagnostic test. That's what I started with. I was trying to make sure that my accuracy is high of answering those questions. Then I knew that there are two things that I will need to study a lot: data sufficiency in quant and sentence correction in verbal. I focused more on sentence correction first, just trying to read through the whole book. Just getting the basic concepts of grammar, like that subject verb agreement, parallelism, all that stuff. I didn't do the Manhattan advanced stuff first. There are like a couple of chapters towards the end, which is like advanced idioms and additional parallelisms, etc. I just read through the whole book. I was in a couple of days, I suppose. That was my first step. Then I started to take the um, do the questions in the official guide itself. I use the web version of OG just to track my answers and accuracy so that I could come back to them later. So that was really it. After that, I got into the groove and started to read one prep book a day. I was walking on treadmill and then just reading through the book. I mean, just reading and
An
walking.
entire book a day on the treadmill.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, those were like 70, 80 pages, and I was just skipping through them. Like, yeah, okay, I
So it
get it.
was a skim. I was going to say, how much weight did you lose over the?
Now, since I have been in Wisconsin, I have actually gained 15 pounds. I used to walk a lot in New York, but somehow people like cheese here a lot, and it's in every.
Cheese, beer, and bratwurst, and it's too cold to walk anywhere in the winter.
Yep, yep, exactly. That's what happened. Like, it's snowing pretty hard right now as well as we speak.
Outstanding. That's Wisconsin. I'm from Iowa originally, so I
Oh,
feel like I'm
nice.
in the West. So, okay, so you're reading through a whole test prep book every day, kind of leafing through it. So you're kind of talking about the Manhattan sort of quant volumes and the critical reasoning and reading comp books.
Yeah, verbal books really first. Like I was reading through the sentence correction. If, for example, sentence correction was 3 or 4 days, it wasn't one day. It's a thick one. So
Okay.
I took like 2 or 3 chapters day one, 2 or 3 chapters day two. Then I would do the questions. Then I would do the book again, on and off, on and off. It took me like 4 or 5 days to do the sentence correction. Then I started reading the number theory because I sort of remembered that I wasn't good with the probability stuff back in the day. I was like, let me do the probability next, the numbers theory. Then I knew the next one that I don't remember much was geometry. So I started to do a little bit of geometry. Geometry book was thick as well. It was like a couple days. It's not a single day read. Um, then then there were like books that I just skimmed through, algebra, etc. I was pretty decent at it. I was like, I'm not going to spend much time here. I will just look through the concepts, not do the questions in that book, just read the theory and move on, and try to do only OG questions. So the questions were only OG. The books were all theory from Manhattan Prep.
Outstanding. So it took you maybe, it sounds like a couple of weeks to get through all the theory.
Yeah.
And then from there, was it official guides, practice tests?
Yeah. Yeah. And then the official guides, what I was doing was I was trying to make sure I do 60 to 70 questions every day. I just counted. If I have the calculations right now, there were like 480 to 500 questions in that thick OG book for quant, and then 400-ish questions for verbal. So I was like, these are 1,000 questions. Let me do 60 every day so that I'm done with the thick book in 15 days.
Yep.
Then there are like these other two books that have like 400-ish questions each. Then I can solve them in 15 odd days. So that will be 30 days. That was my plan. And of course, it didn't pan out the way I wanted it to, but that was really the plan. And then I was like, in between, I will keep doing a lot of mock tests because that competitiveness is what like keeps me going. That hey, how much score am I really getting? So at like after I was done with theory, I was trying to do a lot of mocks. And even if I wasn't doing like the full mock a day, which can be some sort of like mentally burdening, I was doing like just the verbal part of the mock one day and then the quant part of the mock next day. So I was stacking it out, but I was trying to make sure that I do 50, 60 OG questions and then one half a mock whenever I get the time.
And what was your worst score on your mock tests?
So my scores varied, like I mentioned on that test site. My scores worst was around 680.
Wow.
Yeah. And that was for the Manhattan test, Manhattan GMAT test. It was close to 680. Um, Manhattan GMAT were extremely tough for me. I mean, it looked like I was taking too much time to actually do them. Like at the end of the test, I will always have 3 or 4 questions left in quant, and the time will be close to finished. That usually never happens. Like I'm fairly confident in quant. It sometimes happens that I'm not that fast in verbal. I'm taking my time to read the essays or read the passages. But yeah, I mean, my to answer your question directly, long-winded answer. 680 was the minimum. It ranged from 680 to only in one test I got 760. Primarily, it was between 680 to 740.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So 680 to 740, you got one 760, but you never hit 770.
I did not.
Oh, that's
no. Yeah, I did not.
Okay, so then that begs the obvious question. Tell us about your test day. Like what is it that was different, better? Was there anything you did to help your performance? Because you're that rare, wonderful person. Massive, not massive low performers. We're talking about 10 points or 30 points, but who performs on test day. So talk about your test day and kind of what you did leading up to it.
Yeah, sure. I don't want to mislead listeners. Even though I got like low scores in Manhattan, my scores always ranged from 730 to 760 in GMAT prep. I took 3 tests in GMAT prep. One was 730, one was 740 or 50, and one was 760. And 730 was the first test sometime in November end. 740 was around December 15th, and right before the test, it was 760. So it wasn't like something miraculous happened. I was getting up there all the time. So, but to answer your question, to leading up, I think one of the biggest things that I wanted to make sure was to maintain the composure. I didn't put myself in pressure. It was just an exam. And even if, like, the best thing about GMAT is, even if I don't get this great score today, I can take this test again in 2 weeks and I can take it like 5 times a year. Now, that's not the best way to take an exam, frankly. But on the other hand, here's the thing, like if you will put yourself into too much pressure, you will lose that exam composure. And once you lose your exam composure, that's when panic sets in and you might not be able to perform as well as you do at home. So one of my philosophies was I will take every mock exam as it's a GMAT exam, and I will take GMAT exam as it's my last mock exam. Like, it is what it is. Whatever I get, it's fine.
Excellent. Was there ever a moment in the course of your studies where you were really worried, where you thought maybe it wasn't going to happen for you and you weren't going to get to that that mid 700 score? Were there any hiccups along the way?
Oh yeah, I mean, I missed the most important part to tell you. So in the middle, I was getting like 78, 80% accuracy in verbal. And when I took the GMAT prep exams, I got 730 and 40. And I realized that I can do better than that. And I started to look at why I was getting lower accuracy in some of the sentence correction and even RC questions in the exam. That's what got me to GMAT Club, looking for the explanations. That's how I found you. um, um, like one of the best explanations that I always used to find for an answer within GMAT Club was your explanation, where I would like, for example, that explanation, where to use that versus where to use which. There was a huge article on GMAT Club which I found from you, which was extremely valuable. I was getting confused, and then there were a couple other questions that came on GMAT Prep, and GMAT Prep doesn't give you great explanations in those mock tests. I used to come to the side and I would see GMAT Ninja always had the best explanations, and that helped me a lot. And that's when I realized, let me see like this YouTube thing. Do you have any videos in that article you had mentioned? Probably a video, one of those articles that you published, that you have videos, and I started to watch the videos. And that was a great help for me, frankly, Charles, because what I realized was, with the sentence correction books, I had read them 2 or 3 times walking on my treadmills, but it seems like partial knowledge is always dangerous. What I was doing was, earlier, I used to think that, what does the answer make sense? Is it giving me the right meaning in verbal? Then when I read those books, I was trying to be too theoretical. Hey, is the preposition right? Is like this, I don't know. I mean, the dependent clause is here. So should I use a that or a which and all that stuff? But I wasn't going to become a Chomsky in like 2 months. And when I saw your videos, I realized that, hey, I mean, I need to go back. I have like semi knowledge of grammar now, but what I really should focus on is the meaning of what it's saying in the sentence correction. That's what you used to advocate a lot in your videos. And in the last 2 weeks, I started doing that. I was like, I'm not gonna do much about the grammar. I can't do all English grammar in 2 months, even if I want to. What
Right.
GMAT is asking me is it making sense in the sentence correction first and foremost? After that, all of that is secondary, like whether I use this or that, whatever, because I don't even know how the rules. How am I gonna say like whether this makes sense? So yeah, I mean, the GMAT videos and then your videos and then some of the explanations were a big help. As well as for revision, there was this book on GMAT Club for the Quant, which was like 90 pages. And it is great. I mean, what the quadratic inequalities and some of the probability stuff on that, and absolute function, for example, that gave me confidence, even though I knew sort of that I will never use that, or I will probably not encounter such questions on GMAT. But even if I do, I'll be ready for them. So that gave me the confidence that I required.
Outstanding. So Pri, the videos that MK is referring to, and I did not pay him to say this. So on the GMAT Club YouTube page, so I've done 3 video series. So the GMAT Ninja videos, mostly verbal. There's some quant in there as well. So MK is referring to those verbal videos. And again, I did not pay him to say any of this. We just met today.
You did not pay me, and I can say that I watched 7 videos, the whole series, and it was outstanding.
Thank you so much. So obviously there's tons and tons of great stuff on the GMAT Club YouTube page. Now, if you haven't already, everybody, please subscribe. And I've got maybe 25 or 30 videos. Plenty of our other GMAT Club partners also have some great verbal videos up if you want to take a look. The one other hiccup I'm curious about, you mentioned an attempt at the exam in January.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that and what happened, because I kind of love that story.
Yeah. So I started prepping in November. I was supposed to take the exam on January the 7th. Because that's where my Christmas holiday got over. And I was like, I'm going to take the exam right after the holidays. I could not find January 4th, 5th, 6th. 6th was a Monday. So I took the exam on Tuesday. I went to the examination center, and like I said, I was thinking I'm going to maintain my composure. I'm going to be super chill and cool out there. So I took my 8 minutes break. But when I took the 8 minutes break, I didn't realize that the break starts as soon as you press OK. So I was sitting there for 2, 3 minutes. I was like, hey, I mean, let me spend a couple minutes, cheat on the exam a little bit, and then stand up and go out. So I took like 2 minutes to get up and go out. And then I had like my water and my chocolate. I was sitting there. But then when I wanted to go back, they wanted to do the whole pocket check, sign me in, and then there was the palm check, and then there was another person in front of me. So I got us like stuck in line, and by the time she onboarded me, and there was a human factor involved as well, my proctor was a little bit slow, and then she put in like her username and password. She got it wrong the first time, then she put it again. So long story short, I lost like 4.5 minutes in this whole thing. And as like my second exam was verbal exam, and I had like 60.5 minutes. Now, the way I had thought I will take the exam was, hey, I mean, I will divide, we have 35 questions, or how many questions were there? 35,
36. 36.
30,
Yeah.
36 questions, and I'm going to divide it into 6 chunks of 9 minutes, or six, five, 7 chunks of 9 minutes each to get to
Okay.
the exams, like first 5 questions, 9 minutes, etc. And I sort of like became panicky. The only thing that I didn't want to in my exam for the first 5 minutes of verbal, and I was like, I'm just going to cancel this exam and do it again. So I canceled it, went to the official GMAT site, told them what happened, asked for money back. I don't know whether it's going to come. They never replied to me. And then on that day itself, I scheduled an exam after 16 days. That was the closest date available, from January 7th to January 23rd. And then I didn't study much. The only thing that I did after that was took a couple of mocks, and I looked at your videos again just before the exam and did that quant book again. I was like, I know most of the stuff. I'm gonna get myself into trouble by too much studying. I'm just fine. So really, my starting time was from mid-November to January 7th, and after that, I was just skimming through stuff again.
Just trying to stay sharp, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay, so it sounds like the punchline for you. So you're that rare person that was maybe a little bit too chilled out on your test day. Maybe.
I have been thinking about it, Charles. I mean, here's the thing: a lot of people, because they think too much about the scores, right? And what they want to do with that score puts them in pressure.
Yes.
And I was like, if I don't do that, if I let the score come because I have many other opportunities, will I be able to do better than others? Because a lot of people might be better at the exam, the actual exam, than I am. But there is also a component that GMAT is trying to test, which is like the composure and then the time maintenance. If I remain a little bit chill, will I be able to beat them on that? Maybe I'm not able to beat them in the accuracy, but if I'm able to maintain my home accuracy there, that's like the best case outcome.
Right. Especially on an adaptive test. This is something we actually see all the time from GMAT Club members, from our own students who come in who say, yeah, I was too amped up for the test. I was trying so hard to get to my target score that I kind of clenched. I couldn't think clearly. Reading got really hard.
Exactly.
So absolutely. The more you can just kind of take advantage of what you already know, do your best to be relaxed, have a clear head. Absolutely. For what it's worth, for anybody who's watching, who hasn't taken the exam before, you get 8-minute breaks on the GMAT. And that starts as soon as you hit the end of your section and starts after the proctor logs you in. So I think for most people, it feels like about 4 or 5 minutes that you actually get to use to do something. So when you're at home practicing your test, if you're doing a mock exam, plan on 4 or 5 minutes of break when you're at home, because the proctor in that time coming in out of the test room will probably eat 3 or 4 minutes. So that 8 minutes goes by in the blink of an eye, feels more like 4 or 5. Just prepare for that as much as you can if you haven't already been through it. Got a couple user questions. Before we jump into that, is there any other advice that you have off the top of your head before we invite the audience to jump in?
No, I do not. I would just say this, that what I mentioned earlier, don't put yourself into too much pressure for the exam. Maintain your composure, and you will be good. I would say that line again. Think of all your mocks as your GMAT exam, and think of your GMAT as your last mock exam.
That's a great line. I love that. All right, good question from Shamik, who also says that at this current trajectory, so 760 in 2010, 770 in 2020, so you are destined for your 800 in 2030.
780.
Or
I hope I
780.
don't. I hope I don't need it though. I really want to get into the MBA now.
So I guess I would put your 800 at this trajectory in 2050. Shamik also asked, how many hours did you study in a day typically? And were you working also in addition to studying for the exam?
Yeah, so I was studying an hour a day in November, but from December 15th, when I got my break, to January 3rd, I was spending close to like 6 hours a day
Oh, wow.
studying. Yeah, so five, like it will be a stretch time, 6 hours, in the sense that I was sometimes eating or going out and having my coffee, etc. But yeah, I mean, there was good 5 to 6 hours in those 15 to 20 days that I study. So I would estimate 100 to 150 hours total.
Okay, not too bad. Um, Anybody else in the audience? We're not getting a ton of questions today. We scheduled this on short notice, so audience a little smaller than usual. If anybody else has questions, go ahead and feel free to pop it in there. One last question for you about your test day. So on the second of your test days where you got your 770, did you have any particular ritual as far as what you ate before your test or drinking your coffee, what you ate during your break? Was there some ritual that kind of made you comfortable every time you did a mock exam or the actual exam?
No, I was a little bit late, so I went to a Chick-fil-A to grab a chicken sandwich. And no, but I did take, I was like, I will take a chocolate with me because I was like, in the break, sugar will be nice to keep that energy going. And yeah, I mean, I took a couple of chocolates with me. That was my ritual. That what's the best way to get some sugar to keep that adrenaline going?
Outstanding. And I'll give a last call to the audience if you have any more questions. Going once, going twice. MK, do you have anything else that you'd like to share with everybody?
No, I think Charles, I will just share this with you. What you're doing on GMAT Club is awesome. You may not
Thank
even realize this, but you're helping a lot of other folks by just publishing those videos and publishing those posts. So if you can keep doing that in future, that would be awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much, MK. Really appreciate it. We do have one last question that popped in. How much luck do you think was involved on test day for you?
Um, like if you will ask me, I will of course say, hey, there was no luck involved. But I suppose there is always luck involved in. So, for example, I did not get any quant questions wrong in my second test, but
Wow.
the first test I took, I got two wrong. So it was like 50 versus 51, and that could change the score by 10, 20 points, right? I mean, I even though I had screwed up in my first exam verbal, but I still got 50 in my first quant exam. So that could have changed my score by 20 points, I guess, even if I would have gotten the same verbal score. So there is always a luck involved in like your scores being plus minus 30. I suppose that's what you guys say it on the website. I would have hated a 740, frankly, but yes, there is luck involved, I would say. But I would also say this, I would never expect 640, for example. So I had my own guardrails on which I would have gotten that score. There is always luck involved in the questions that you get, but nothing that you can do with it.
And related, so we got people asking about kind of what you saw in your exam. You can't give up too much, obviously. You signed something saying you're not going to describe any actual questions, but how close were the questions in your actual exam versus the official guide questions or your mock exams?
So quant was slightly easier. Verbal was, in fact, slightly tougher, I would say, because I always used to think that the first few questions will be easy in verbal. The first three questions that got thrown at me were extremely tough. They were like long sentence correction answers, and two of them were very, very, very similar. Um, I mean, both of them looked correct, and I was like, "This is not happening. Either I'm gonna not get a good score, or something's wrong. These guys are sending very tough questions up front." But after the first three, it changed, and then I got through like some easy questions, and then they became difficult again. So I would say this: even if you're getting what you feel are the tough questions up front, just take your time and move on.
Excellent. And did you feel like the official guide and your actual exam were similar enough? Are you saying that you were comparing the mock exams to your actual exam, where you said your actual exam was harder in verbal, a little easier in quant? And would you say the same about the official guide versus
Yeah,
that?
so no, I think the official guide has some extremely tough questions. If you look at medium and hard questions in the verbal sentence correction, like that Athena question, the Athens, the women in Athens or
Yeah,
something,
it's a GMAT
that
prep
should,
question. Yep.
yeah, the GMAT prep. Like you discussed that, and then there is a parallelism question where the parallelism starts at the start of the sentence and you're not able to see it. I think you discussed that in your GMAT video somewhere as well. There are tough questions in sentence correction that I would never be able to get it right. But medium to hard, if you just keep practicing them, and if you're aiming a high score, that's the level of exam you will get in your GMAT as well. Some easy questions thrown in, but mostly what GMAT website, like if you look at the OGs on the web, the medium and hard is the level of difficulty that you will get. Mostly medium, I would say, not the hard ones. And yeah, I was going to say one more thing, but I sort of forgot now.
No worries. I have a question about probability questions. Was there a particular resource that you used that you found useful for probability specifically?
So I used both Manhattan and I used Quant from GMAT Club. I was also searching for the probability questions. Like I said at the start of the call, I wasn't very good at it. I found a website which preps you for CAT exams, the Indian CAT exam. That had like 20 odd questions with replacement and without replacement draw and stuff like that. Those were the questions that I found helpful. They would never come on GMAT though, but they were still, because I was, like I said, I was in that mindset that what I prepared the last time in 2010 when I was doing the CAT, like that with replacement, without replacement draw, how the probability versus combinatorics differ, etc. Those 15, 20 questions were good to have, but I would say this, even if you're doing just the GMAT Club quant work and the Manhattan prep work, you will still be covered.
Cool. And how many probability questions did you see on your actual exam? Do you remember specifically?
I don't think I got very many probability questions, one or two maybe. I mean, there will be counting of number type questions that were there, but not very many probability questions, one or two, I suppose.
Cool. Okay, so not a huge thing. So Karan, and again, apologies for any mispronunciations of names. Sounds like official guide, Manhattan books. You can always search on GMAT Club. The search question feature should more than cover you, but it's also not a huge part of the test. So if you're worried about probability, it's probably not going to be the thing that's going to ruin your day.
Or that may be my luck, like somebody asked, that I didn't get what I was probably weaker in. But yeah, I mean, I think one thing that you missed was that quant book on GMAT Club. It's good.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's a wrap. I'm not seeing any more questions from the audience. So unless you have any last wisecracks for people who are watching and suffering through.
Now, I know it's probably pretty late for everybody watching. So I think that's all I had to say.
Fantastic. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And again, this is number 3 in our series of live debriefs here on the GMAT Club YouTube page. If you want to check out the other 2, these are 3 very, very different people that had very different paths to the 700 Club. First one, D. Cummins. This is a guy who studied for more than 2,200 hours over the course of several years to get to his 700 plus score. We had Toffel, who did some pretty interesting things along a 3-month path, had some really interesting advice. MK here, who studied 10 years ago, has a really strong background in quant. So 3 people with very, very different profiles, very, very different backgrounds. Check these out. Maybe one of the other ones will resonate with you more or less than this one, or you'll get some different advice out of them. And again, if you want to follow them on GMAT Club, username is Baboosh123. I'm Charles from GMAT Ninja, GMAT Club's resident verbal expert. Hit that subscribe button. And thank you so much for watching, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you, MK.